I'm Dr. John Kruse, and today I'm going to be talking about, does iron have anything to do with ADHD? So as usual, I will start with the take-home message, and after a minute or two, jump into the main talk. So the take-home message is that the body does contain tiny amounts of iron, 4 or 5 grams worth. Even though iron is the most abundant element on Earth. Now, 3/4 of the iron in your body is in the molecule hemoglobin in your blood for shunting oxygen around, but iron still does have an important role in the brain. And there are more than 24 studies showing low iron levels are correlated with severity of ADHD symptoms. So lower iron levels, more likely to have ADHD and more severe ADHD. And there are a few studies suggesting that for kids who have low iron, supplementing with iron is correlated with improvement in ADHD symptoms. Now, does that mean everyone with ADHD should be jumping for iron supplementation? Absolutely not. So iron is something that's very tightly regulated in your body. Too much can be a problem, as well as too little. Iron is, by mass, the most abundant element on planet Earth, so far and away number one. But if we look at just the crust of the Earth, only about 5% of the Earth's crust is iron. That still makes it the 4th most abundant element in the crust, but substantially lower than it is overall. And again, in the human body, there's only 4 to 5 grams of iron, and that's about 5 or 6 M&Ms worth of iron in your whole entire body. And about 3/4 of that iron is bound up in heme molecules, which are globular molecules, round molecules with iron in the middle of them in the reduced state. So it's in the ferrous state. So you could say that heme is the first ferrous wheel. So heme is important not just in hemoglobin, which is shuttling oxygen all around our body and exchanging oxygen for carbon dioxide in our lungs. Heme is a component of the myoglobin, which is where some oxygen gets stored in muscle cells. And the heme is a component of the cytochrome P450 enzymes. Those are the enzymes responsible for breaking down most medications, most drugs, and most of those genetic tests are looking at different versions of P450 to see if you have a more active or less active or inactive version of it. And again, all those cytochrome P450 molecules have a heme moiety in there that's responsible for electron transfer. In addition to transporting oxygen around the body, iron's really good at transporting electrons. It's also important for DNA synthesis. It's essential for building the myelin sheaths, the insulating sheaths that surround the white matter, the axon tracts in the brain. And iron is a cofactor, so it's an essential component of many enzymes. And one that's particularly important for ADHD is iron is a cofactor for the tyrosine hydroxylase. Tyrosine hydroxylase is the enzyme that converts the amino acid L-tryptophan to L-dopa. And then with just one more step, L-dopa is made into dopamine. So iron is essential for dopamine synthesis, essential for norepinephrine synthesis, since it's just one step beyond dopamine to make norepinephrine. So it's not surprising that iron may be involved in factors related to ADHD, since dopamine and norepinephrine are involved with ADHD. Iron is something that your body does not make. It can't manufacture elements brand new. It needs to get it from the diet. In general, iron's pretty poorly absorbed, so less than 15% of the iron we eat in our diet is absorbed. It goes from the duodenum, the first segment of the small intestine, into the bloodstream by a molecule called transferrin, binds to it in the ferric, the iron +3 state. Transferrin conveys iron from the intestine into the bloodstream, and then from the bloodstream, molecule called ferritin is involved in binding to the iron and storing iron in the liver, in the spleen, in the bone marrow. And ferritin, the iron is in the ferrous, that's gained an electron, so it's a reduced state. So big stores of the body outside of hemoglobin in red blood cells is ferritin, and again, in the body, that's in the liver, in the spleen, in the bone marrow, but in the brain as well. So ferritin-bound iron is present in the oligodendrocytes. Those are the glial cells. Those are the cells that are in charge of making myelin, the insulation for the cells. And the other area in the brain where there's higher concentrations of iron are the basal ganglia. And again, those are the cell bodies of where most of the dopamine nerves that send projections to the prefrontal cortex are. So usually when we are measuring iron in the body, we're not looking at iron levels. Those can be obtained, but most of the iron is not existing as free iron floating around because iron can have damaging effects. So usually ferritin levels are one of the more sensitive measures of the body's stores of iron. There's other ways of getting an assessment of iron levels. So the hematocrit, which is the percentage of red blood cells in your blood plasma. If you have low iron, you're going to likely to have a low hematocrit. And it also makes the size of the red blood cells smaller. One of the important, or probably the primary hormone for regulating iron levels is something called hepcidin. Hepcidin's made in the liver, and hepcidin is part of what's responsible for decreasing absorption and also inhibiting the release of iron, ferritin-bound iron from cellular storage. Your body recycles most of the iron it keeps. It isn't excreting it. So your daily intake is usually less than 1% of your total body stores. So most of the iron is sort of recirculating as red blood cells age. As others age, there's lysosomes that ingest the iron-containing molecules and recycle them for use without letting free iron float around and cause damage. So jumping over to ADHD and iron, we have more than 24 studies showing that kids with ADHD compared to kids without ADHD tend to have lower levels of iron. Almost always those were studies looking at ferritin levels, again, to get a measure of iron stores. There's a much smaller number of studies showing reduced iron in the basal ganglion in kids with ADHD compared to kids without ADHD. And there's even a study that shows that giving stimulants can reduce that iron deficit in the basal ganglia. So that's not with a single dose, but it's over time. And the longer the kid with ADHD has been on stimulant medications, the more normalization of iron status in the brain. And there's some correlation with normalization of iron status in the brain and improved executive function and cognitive function and performance. So low iron levels are associated with ADHD symptoms, particularly inattentive, but also impulsive in some studies. Now, there have been some studies that did not find a correlation between ferritin levels and ADHD versus normal. Those have been the minority, but there have been some. There are many fewer studies in adults with ADHD looking at iron status. One that was done a few years ago did not find any difference in brain stores of iron in the basal ganglia between ADHD individuals and those without, and didn't find any acute effects of treatment with stimulant medication in iron stores. There's also some sort of observational studies looking at women where heavy menstrual bleeding, which depletes iron stores, is correlated at least with greater likelihood and greater severity of ADHD symptoms. It's not clear if that's a cause or effect or just a correlation. And we do have at least 2 randomly controlled trials, sort of the gold standard studies, showing that in children with low iron and ADHD symptoms, supplementation with iron can improve ADHD symptoms. There's actually several studies looking at a combination of iron and zinc showing benefits of supplementing iron and zinc in kids with ADHD can improve ADHD levels. So I'd say in general for kids with ADHD, it may be worth checking out iron levels and supplementing them. There's also some evidence that low iron levels are correlated with poorer response to stimulants. So particularly if a kid is not responding well, I don't think everyone should be jumping on taking iron supplements because iron needs to be in the right range, not too little, not too much. How do we know too much iron can be dangerous? Well, there's a condition called hemochromatosis. It's a genetic condition where there's deficits in hepcidin, that hormone that regulates, and there's a range in severity in this condition. Too much iron winds up being absorbed. That can show up initially as fatigue, joint pain, weakness, sexual dysfunction, but over time can lead to heart damage, liver damage, kidney damage, and death. A range of foods that inhibit iron absorption to some extent, and these are all pretty common things. So calcium-based foods can inhibit heme iron absorption. So dairy products, leafy greens, polyphenols, so coffee, caffeine, tea, eggs, even though egg yolks are fairly rich in iron, the phosphatin in eggs can actually reduce iron absorption, and polyunsaturated fatty acids, including omega-3s, can inhibit some iron absorption. Tannins found in teas and grapes, and phytates, which are common in nuts and lentils, and there are other foods that contain these substances. Increasing acidity of the stomach can actually boost iron absorption. So those are some dietary factors to be aware of. There's a process called ferroptosis, which is a regulated cell death characterized by iron-dependent lipid peroxidation. So it's a oxidative stress reaction, and it's particularly damage to the fatty acids, polyunsaturated fatty acids that are a major component of cell membranes, including nerve cell membranes. Well-characterized process, although we weren't aware of its importance until maybe the last decade. And ferroptosis, or this programmed cell death, is a factor in cancer. It's a factor of degenerative brain conditions such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. It's involved in some of the damage after ischemia, which is cutting off the blood supply. So after strokes or after heart attacks, myocardial infarctions, some of the cumulative damage is through ferroptosis. It's implicated as a significant factor in long-term liver damage and kidney disease. And it's also a component of how infectious processes, inflammation, cause cellular damage. So particularly at the end of life, there's been studies showing that higher iron levels in the basal ganglion, the very same area where too little in childhood is associated with higher rates of ADHD, but too much iron in your basal ganglia at the end of life is actually correlated with higher rates of dementia. In just a 3-year follow-up time, we can see that significant iron deposition is continuing to occur or accumulate in the basal ganglia. And the greater the rate of iron accumulation, the more it's correlated with, whether it's direct cause or not, it's certainly correlated with impairment in cognitive and executive functioning. On the other hand, the good news is that diets that are high in those iron absorption lowering factors, so high in dairy, high in polyunsaturated fatty acids like omega-3s, high in coffee, tea, tannins, green leafy vegetables, that actually seems to lower the rate of iron deposition in the basal ganglia and lower the risk of dementia processes or cognitive dysfunction. Everyone should not just rush out and get iron supplements. If you have low iron, it may be of help, particularly earlier in life. That may be more helpful, and particularly as you age, it's important to be more careful about what you're doing regarding iron balance in your brain.